Hashtag don't tax my credit union. What's at stake? Hello and welcome to Headlines in Fine Print. I'm Dion Williams, President and CEO of Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. Just as a reminder before we get into today's content, we do archive all of our content on our YouTube and Spotify channels. So if you like what you hear and you'd like to listen to more episodes, we invite you to do so. Also invite you to like, share, and follow our content. So with no further ado, let's get into our topic today of hashtag don't tax my credit union. One big beautiful bill. If you follow the news, you may have heard of the one big beautiful bill concept from the new administration. And we're going to focus on one aspect of that bill as it pertains to credit unions, which is tax cuts. Now, of course, with tax cuts, the first question that comes to mind is, how are we going to pay for it? And so that's where the credit union tax exemption comes into play. A recent article from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance projects that the credit union tax exemption would bring $30 billion of revenue over the next 10 years. But that's a very short-sighted view with so many flaws. So we're going to set the record straight on the credit union tax exemption and kind of go into the fine print of the real impact that credit unions have on its members and the communities that we serve. So as far as the credit union tax exemption goes, you may recall from a previous episode that we did on credit union myths, credit unions pay all kinds of taxes. We pay employment taxes, we pay property taxes, our employees pay taxes on their earnings. The one tax that we don't pay that we have the exemption for is the federal income tax. And that's it. But let's take this to another level. We're a not-for-profit financial cooperative. So what that means is we give back to our member owners. Our quote-unquote profits go back to our member owners. And we do that in three ways. We give our members the best rates we can on deposits and loans. We have a low fee structure for our members. And we invest in the future for our members. We do that through technology, through new products and services, and through service delivery channels. So now that we've covered the credit union tax exemption, let's now talk about the overall impact of credit unions. And I want to direct you to a website that's sponsored by America's Credit Unions. It's don'ttaxmycreditunion.org. And there's a wealth of data and documentation about the impact of credit unions. But I would like to take a few minutes to talk about some items specifically as to how credit unions are collectively making a difference for our members and the communities that we serve. So first of all, credit unions create 1.2 billion jobs. There's 1.2 billion people employed in credit unions across the country. Secondly, there's 140 million credit union members throughout the country. The estimated economic impact of credit unions is through $297 billion. And in terms of consumer benefits created by credit unions, it's $35 billion. Let's step back and think about that article that said the credit unions being taxed would generate $30 billion over the next 10 years. That number is absolutely dwarfed by the $297 billion of the economic impact of credit unions and the $35 billion of consumer benefits derived by credit unions. In fact, removing the credit union tax exemption would be a tax on Main Street. It would be a tax on consumers. It would be a tax on small businesses. And furthermore, credit unions make up less than 10% of the financial services marketplace. Less than 10%. So the headline of $30 billion may sound nice, but the fine print of the difference that credit unions make in the communities we serve and the lives of the members that we serve is the real story. And that's why our tax exemption must be preserved. It's hard to talk about the credit union tax impact without bringing our friends, the bankers, into the equation. And the bankers' solution to this is to divide and conquer. So the bankers would support the fact that credit unions over $1 billion should be taxed and credit unions less than $1 billion should not be taxed. And I can show you with a couple of examples how that thinking is flawed. We've seen this too many times in Congress and through regulation that when they try to say, well, this only applies to the large institutions or this doesn't apply to the small institutions, it's a fool's errand. It just doesn't hold water. So the first example I'm going to give you is the Durbin Amendment. About a decade ago, there was a cap put on interchange income. So when you swipe your debit card at a merchant, there's fees associated with that. We could do a whole show on that because the fees that we use, we fight fraud with it. We offer safe and secure card programs through those fees. It's not just money going to the bottom line. But when the Durbin rule came out, it basically said, well, institutions of a certain size had this cap and institutions below that size don't. And that's not how it turned out. As it turns out, the fee income on those merchant debit card swipes went down across the board for everybody. And furthermore, the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond did a study because one of the other ideas behind this bill was that capping those interchange fees would mean lower prices at the cash register for consumers. And that's not what happened at all. Consumers did not see lower prices, and smaller institutions saw their revenue from the interchange income go down. The second example comes from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So last year, the CFPB pursued a rule that was going to cap late fees on credit cards at $8. And again, the narrative was this is going to apply to the large institutions, but not to the small. But what they inherently created was an unfair competitive advantage for the larger institutions. Because you see, if the fees are capped at one level for one institution, if all the others don't follow suit, then consumer behavior is going to drive you towards that lower fee. So once again, the law of unintended consequences came into play. So that's the whole problem with segregating credit unions between large and small. Whether it's the intended end game or not, the result is that it segregates and really puts the smaller institutions at a disadvantage. And over the long term, the more this continues, puts you on the brink of extinction. So make no mistake about it, credit unions are united of all shapes and sizes. We work together, and we work together to preserve the tax-exempt status because we know the difference that we're making in the lives of our members and the communities that we serve. And from the banker's perspective, credit unions put branches in places where banks have pulled out of and where banks would not go in the first place. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today on the hashtag Don't Tax My Credit Union movement. If this topic piques your interest, I would invite you to go to the Don't Tax My Credit Union website. And on the website, there's actually a call to action. You can make your voice heard by contacting your elected leaders as they pursue this legislation pertaining to the budget and tax cuts. Because if we don't take action, Main Street, working class consumers, and small businesses are going to be hurt if there is a tax incorporated on the income of credit unions. Thank you so much for joining us today for Headlines in Fine Print with Dion Williams, brought to you by Piedmont Advantage Credit Union. Just want to remind you that the credit union has a wealth of resources available for you, and we invite you to look us up on the web at pacu.com. Give us a call. We can set an appointment. We have certified financial counselors, wealth management services, and a lot of products and services that meet your banking needs. And we invite you to take advantage of that. If you want to reach out to me directly, my email is dion.williams@pacu.com, and my phone number is 336-750-7088. Would love to hear from you if you'd like to weigh in on a topic from this show or a past episode, or even suggest a topic for a future episode. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.